Right now it's a point in the gardening season, or at least this gardening season anyway, where it's still pretty cold and things are pretty slow to get going. So you have to really just be satisfied with slow, fairly incremental changes rather than big, amazing changes in the garden. So I'm going to show a couple of little things that I've noticed in the garden that might not be the most impressive things, but I think are exciting nonetheless. In previous videos I showed that I have some violets interplanted with different things I have in various containers, and I mentioned that I wasn't too sure if they'd be producing any flowers because it was quite shady, but I've noticed that on this plant there is a little flower bud forming just right there. So I think that bodes well for the other ones producing flowers as well. And speaking of flowers, I've also noticed that on my tomato plants, some of the little flower buds I had for a while now are starting to open up. You can see kind of the yellow inside. So even though it's really cold, they seem to be moving along. So hopefully those will get pollinated. And another change that I've noticed is in the Alpine strawberries over here. So far the Alpine strawberries have been putting out one new leaf every once in a while. I'll see if I can find a growth shoot on one of these. So this is what the new shoot looks like. So it puts out one of these, and then once the new shoot is established, it'll send out a new one. But I've noticed that on some of the larger plants, there are a whole whack of shoots coming out simultaneously. So in here you can see there are like, I don't know, maybe 10 different shoots coming out all at once, and it has various baby leaves being produced. So I think that's a good sign that the roots are getting well established, and that hopefully the plants will be getting significantly larger within the next couple of weeks once those leaves develop. I also have some new additions to the garden. So I was finally able to put out these red robin tomatoes. They're a very small, compact, determinate variety. I think they get about 8 to 10 inches tall. And I planted these in February, so they've been growing inside for a while now, and they have just been hardened off and put outside. So I'm hopeful that these will do well. They're said to need less light than some other varieties of tomatoes, so I'm hopeful that they will produce fruit, but they're not at the stage yet where they are blossoming or anything like that. Another new addition to the garden this week is this little basil plant. So this is called an Aristotle Basil. It looks a little bit like a topiary. It has kind of this bulbous shape that grows out of a central stem at the bottom, and this shape is apparently naturally occurring. So if you harvest a piece of it, it will sort of naturally regrow into this ball-like shape. It has a really pretty and strong scent, and also a really intense flavor. The flavor is, as I said, a really intense, kind of like basil flavor, but it also has kind of a bubblegum taste going on. Not like a mint bubblegum, but like a pink candy bubblegum flavor, which is really odd, but tastes quite nice. So that's the other addition to the garden this week, and I still have a couple of things indoors under grow lights. The cucumbers and also some beans that I've started that will be coming out in the next few weeks, but it's still at this point kind of cold in the season, so those are waiting indoors until it gets a bit warmer. And sadly, we also have the first apparent failure of the garden of the season. So these are the ramps that I bought at the supermarket. They had roots attached, so I just tried sticking them in soil to see if they'd regrow. And the leaves kind of just turned yellow and withered, and I cut them off and they look pretty much dead. So I thought that I would dump maybe one of these out and see if we can have a look at what's going on below the soil and see if there was any root growth or if just nothing ever happened at all. Doing this one-handed is going to be really fun, but we'll try anyways. So actually, these roots do look like they grew a fair amount from when I bought them. The roots were not anywhere near this long, which is interesting. So I might try actually just leaving this part of the plant in the ground a little longer. The roots feel wet and like they're still got some life in them. So maybe I'll try actually just leaving them in there longer and seeing if it regrows or what happens. I'm not really too sure, but yeah, the leaves that were attached to it didn't do very well, but perhaps there's still some promise in this little root mass that's left here. So other than that, not a whole lot of big observable changes going on. I'm still trying to get a sense of the light that falls on the balcony at different parts of the afternoon, so I can move containers around in terms of what needs more light or what will tolerate less light. And I'm also still somewhat trying to figure out spacing of things and organization of things within planters. So for example, with this container, these Alpine strawberries I have are just extras, so I'm going to be taking these out and giving them to a friend, and then in the space that's left over, I'm probably going to be putting either the cucumber that I have started inside or some beans. I'm doing companion planting in pretty much all of the containers I have, so in most of them you'll find 2 if not more crops growing, and I have a couple of reasons for that. So one of the reasons is that some plants benefit the growth of other plants. So for example, over here they're little, but I have some spinach started here and some peas, and peas are a nitrogen fixing crop. They put nitrogen into the soil, and greens like spinach benefit from the additional nitrogen, so they have a nice relationship going on in that sense. But I'm also growing things, different things in the same container because different plants have different growth habits. So in this one, for example, there's garlic growing, which is predominantly growing below the soil, so most of the space that it's taking up is below the soil. And then I also have some little arugula that's started over here. So arugula is going to be growing about this tall. It will take the place of this where the soil is, and the garlic is going to be growing mostly again below the soil, so they're using different surface areas within the soil. So you can maximize the amount of things that you're growing in the container if you are conscious about the kind of the growth habit of different kinds of plants. And then the final change from the balcony is that things are starting to get green in the world. So I have a bit of a nicer view when I'm looking outside, although it's still pretty cold, still pretty gray, and still feels like it's threatening to rain.